What's up, homies? It's Boo from Mile High Distilling, and today we have been cranking out a few recipes throughout this 2 or 3 month period, just trying different things. This one we've got going on, we are really excited for. It's going to be a Mile High exclusive. It's going to be our Patriot's Pride corn whiskey. So what that is 3 different types of corn. We're going to have a red corn, blue corn, and white corn, all in a 7.5 pound bag. We're going to be doing 3 of those 7.5 pound bags for this recipe kit for 22.5 pounds of corn total. Now on top of that, it's also going to include everything you see here. So we're going to have some gypsum and some acid blend to adjust our pH as needed. That's for our enzymes. Our enzymes will kind of differ in pH. We're going to have an oak stick for you, and then we're also going to include some pH testing strips. So you're going to get all that in this kit. It's going to be a pretty simple recipe, and today we're just going to do it, okay? So let's get started. To begin the recipe, we start nice and simple by adding hot water into a mash tun or some place to cook these grains. Now in the past recipes we've done, we've tried to make it at least a little bit modular to where you don't need a cooker. You can do it in a fermentation bucket and sort of keep that bucket insulated, and hopefully it heats up your grains well enough. It's not really as effective as a mash tun. For this one, you are going to need a cooker of some type. So think about that if you're looking to do this recipe and don't have access to one. They're pretty cheap. They can be. People improvise as well. But regardless, you're going to want your mash tun, and you're going to want to put 5 gallons of hot water into that tun. And our next step from there is just going to be adding our grains. So there's a few different ways you can do this. There's nothing wrong with putting loose grains into your mash tun, provided you have some way to keep off the bottom. If you have a hot plate like this and you don't have a false bottom or something to hoist those grains up below that base, this hot plate is just going to stick and scorch everything in here. So you need a way to protect against that. What I like to do though is grab what's called a brew bag. I use a very large nylon straining bag. I put all my grains in there and then dump it right in. And it's very easy removal as well. And it's also great because with corn, you can do something known as a sour mash. So what that means is after you do the corn, after you ferment it, you can keep the leftover spent corn in your fermentation, and next batch, repitch your yeast, maybe add a little bit of corn sugar or something like that, and you can do another batch with that corn. It's called a sour mash. So we're going to get the option to do that if we use this step where we keep things in a bag. It's going to be a lot easier than going loose, but it's up to you at the end of the day. I should probably mention to you all, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. It's a Monday here and I'm not thinking properly. We don't want to put in our grains until after we reach our set point. Now our set point for corn is going to be about 170. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and get our boiler, our mash tun, up to about 175. And then when we add our grains, it's going to slightly cool us down. We should be right at 170 at that point. We're going to let things cook from there. And then after we have a set amount of time that cook is corn, we're going to add our enzymes and should be done. We might have to adjust pH. We have really good water here in Colorado. Probably going to have to adjust slightly just because those enzymes are going to require a little more than your base level pH. But should be a pretty simple process. So it's a waiting game for me. I will see you guys in just 1 second. It's going to be more like an hour for me. I guess one thing we should talk about as we're waiting for stuff to boil is this kit is going to provide just about everything you need to get this recipe done outside of equipment. So like we mentioned, you might need to buy a mash tun or a cooker to use this recipe. You might be able to improvise with something around you. Aside from that, one thing you really want to look at in terms of equipment is a spoon or a paddle. So something like this or this is going to be a really nice utensil. It's going to allow those grains to stir. And remember, the more efficient we are at stirring these grains, the more sugars are going to be released. That's going to increase something called their efficiency, which is going to get us a higher ABV, alcohol by volume. So you want to pay a good attention to detail when you are running this recipe. When that corn goes in there, you want to stir, 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 and don't let up and get as much of those sugars out as we can possibly. Now that we're up to temp, let's go ahead and add our basket, or add our brewing bag rather. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be letting this cook for about 90 minutes or so. Well, we're going to be letting it cook for about 30. Then we're gonna add our first out of 2 enzymes. And then when that happens, we're gonna be using our pH strips and everything else and sort of adjusting pH from there if needed. But for now, we're gonna let this sit for about 30. What I would recommend is every 2 or 3 minutes, you're coming back here and giving everything a stir in here, and that's gonna give you good efficiency. I'm a little bit busy. I'm gonna have to make it probably every 5 minutes just to not waste too much time. But with you, if you're focused on this, you're home for the day on a weekend, wanting to do this recipe, try to make it every 2 or 3, give it a nice stir, let it be, repeat until 30 minutes are up. Now we're gonna go ahead and add our alpha enzyme now. Now, this is an endo-amylase, which means it's gonna take care of most of our starch conversion. Then we're gonna come back in with an exo-amylase, that's our glucoamylase, and that's gonna attack the ends of those bonds of starch for full conversion. But this will take care of, 90% of the conversion. A lot of people end up just using this and skipping the exo-amylase because they, don't feel like messing around with it. But we include both in the kit, and I'm gonna use both for full conversion as much as I can. Now with this, there are instructions on the back. You're always free to follow. This is gonna be, you're gonna wanna put this in at about 175 degrees or so, a little under, which is where we're at, a little under there. All we're gonna do here is add. It does get a little bit harder with that grain bag for situations like this, but I'm adding it through the sides of my bucket. You could also add it on top. And really now it's a waiting game once again. We've added everything. We do want to go ahead and get a pH strip, and we're going to test for pH. We're going to have a guide for that pH, but what can happen when you're using enzymes is they can tend to screw up your pH. So you want to take an initial reading, and then what I'll do is after 30 minutes, I'm going to take another reading and make sure that I'm still where I need to be. Typically with these enzymes, every enzyme is a little different, so take this all with a grain of salt. But a lot of these alpha like to be just like weakly acidic, so like a 6.0, sometimes 7 or up to 8. I've seen some crazy ones. Alpha is usually pretty solid and is right within that basic pH range, but your gluco is usually the one that needs a little bit more of that pH. So we'll see if that becomes an issue. Right now it's not. We're just gonna let things sit for 60 minutes. Again, stirring every 2 to 5 minutes. Now I will say it's not very typical to use a brew bag when we're cooking these grains. I just really don't like this mash tun and its small little hole. And if I put loose grains in here, it just clogs up like crazy. So I used a bag, but I will not lie, it does make this process a little bit harder. However, remember, when we add our alpha, we're going from a really thick consistency in our corn. It's gonna loosen everything up and thin it out. As long as the corn's doing that, regardless if it's in a bag or not. If it's actually thin, you're good to go. Enzymes are doing their job, and you're also gonna smell it. I'm smelling a lot more now. We should also take this time to do another pH test. So let's drop in our pH strip for just a second here. And we are still exactly where we want to be. And with that, we have completed our boil for our alpha. Now our next steps, we're gonna let this cool down just a tiny bit to about 150 degrees, 170 to 150 degrees. And then from there, we can go ahead and add our glucoamylase, our beta amylase, if you will. And from there, we give it another hour, and we are finished with the recipe. So again, it's going to take me a little bit, but you will see me in just 1 second as we add our gluco. All right, and now that we've reached our 140 degrees Fahrenheit, we are going to go ahead and turn off our heat, go ahead and pitch our GA. We'll take a new pH reading, make sure everything's good, and if it is, we're just going to let things sit for about an hour until we naturally cool down to pitch our yeast at a certain temperature. That's what I didn't mention in this kit. I didn't show you guys. It does come with some daddy yeast, which is a really popular yeast. You just get a little packet of it, and that's gonna be pretty good for this recipe. It's gonna be really tolerable. It's not gonna be anything super volatile like some of the turbo yeast can get. So it should work off this corn pretty well. One thing to quickly mention on this GA is Usually there's some sort of pH optimal range for these. These packets don't seem to have them. So I'm going to do more research and see if there is, but I'm taking their instructions as they are. And I don't think I'm really going to have to mess too much with pH. Now, with this GA, you can just technically let this sit. I think what I'm going to do is, just to get the best results possible, this is my first ever time doing this, to be honest with you. And I want the best results possible. So I'm going to go ahead and continue my stirring every 5 minutes for me. 2 to 3 is what I recommend for you guys. And we'll proceed like that for an hour. Looks like our pH has gone down, but I still seem to be okay as far as I understand with the research I've done. I'm going to double check that and go back and give you guys an update here in 1 sec. Okay, and upon further research, we are looking good. The BA is going to have an optimal pH range of about 5.5 to 6, which that's where we were. The GA I'm using is going to have an optimal range of about 4.5 to 5, so a little under base level pH, which is where I'm at. So we're looking good. We'll probably take one more pH test about 30 minutes into this process, but for now, it's really just waiting for everything to break down through that GA. And here we are, folks, at the end. Our pH is looking good. Everything's cooled down to where it needs to be. I will say I went back and edited the first part of this video just a little bit today. Realized that before, when I first started, I mentioned using 5 gallons of water. That's because I had a bucket full of 5 gallons and my stupid monkey brain just, you know, messed up. You're going to use 10 gallons of water in this recipe. You get 10 gallons. And then when you put in your bag to let everything, and you put in all your grains and let everything cook in there, when you get those grains out, that's going to put you at about 5 to 6 gallons of just liquid, which is exactly what we want. So that's what I have now. I have 6 gallons worth of just the liquid. My grains have been removed. I'm doing a sour mash with those grains, so they are sitting in a bucket, and I'm going to pitch yeast for those spent grains here in a tiny bit. But for now, we're going to finish this recipe up. I'm going to have my yeast, and we're just pitching through. Well, anyways, guys, that's going to be it for today. We will let you know an update in the near future how this recipe turned out. You'll be watching us do the video anyway, I'm sure. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're looking to try this recipe, then please look down below in the description. We're going to have links to that recipe. Should include everything you saw here today. Hopefully we gave you a good guideline with it, but you're also going to get an instruction sheet with the recipe kit to kind of help you along. Hope you all enjoy.